everybody is refreshed, and good afternoon, colleagues and friends. So before we start, I must really thank people here, children, parents, schools, my collaborators, and most importantly, the fund SCOLAR has provided for this project. Without all of these people, this project would not be possible. So I would like to start by addressing some of the difficulties that ethnic minority children are facing in the kindergarten. I think if you're a teacher or principal, please let me know if you think this does not include all. First of all, I think the most important difficulty is the lack of home literacy, language and home literacy environment. They are basically weak in oral language. So we know if you're linguistics or psychologists or teachers, we know the language input and exposure are basically essential for children to develop language. So they don't have it at home. Perhaps they don't have it enough in the kindergarten either. And so but at the same time, they are compared with local children, native speakers. They are expected to learn and to read and write at the same time with the local children. So we also had a chance to talk with the parents and to hear about their voice. So they generally feel the same. And also they are very eager to seek some of help. So on top of that, those social culture difficulties they're facing at home and at the kindergarten. They are also facing one of the most difficult language or literacy in the world. Based on our previous research, we do compare what are the basic cognitive mechanisms that underlie learning to read English and read Chinese. What we have found out in the last 20, 30 years research from 20, 30 years of research is that it is unlike that for learning to read English. For English, a lot of people, the research has identified most important fundamental blocks are including oral language as well as phonological, or more specifically, phonemic awareness skills. And that enables to help children learning to read. But for Chinese, recent researchers actually, a lot of researchers in Hong Kong from across different universities, we have been working on identify what are the most important cognitive skills that are associated with learning to read in Chinese, and try to pinpoint what are the most key things. What are the meta-linguistic skills that are important for Chinese? So what we have found is, unlike phonological awareness skills that is associated with English, learning to read English, for Chinese, morphological awareness skills, and orthographic skills, that includes the sensitivity to radicals, and also fine motor skills, your hand-eye coordination skills. Of course, most of all, the oral language skills plays a significant role. So just to lay a kind of a bit foundation, how many of you are familiar with the term morphological awareness skills? Would you please raise your hand? Okay, great. So thank you. And would anybody help me to define the Chinese word for plane, 飞机? How would you define the word 飞机? Can anybody give me a help? How would you define 飞机? Or how would you explain this word to a kid? All right, thank you. Thank you. Thanks at the back. Machine that flies. Can anybody help to? My Cantonese is very basic, so I'll try. 飛機係可以飛嘅嗰個機器係嘛? Okay. So this is what we are trying to establish, trying to get the kids to understand the how a Chinese word is combined by morphemes. So in this word, plane, 飛機, there are two morphemes, so fly and machine. So the machine that flies is called 飛機. How do you say a chair that flies in Chinese? Yes, a chair that flies. How would you define that? How would you say that in Chinese? 飛椅, 係嗎? Okay. How about how would you give a name to a carpet that flies? 飛氈, 飛氈, 飛毯, 係嗎? 飛毯 or 飛氈. So whatever. So you understand that concept. This is what we call morphological awareness skills, that compounding skills. If a child has this kind of compounding skill, and they're very easily to be able to unpack a meaning unit and also combine a meaning unit. I think the common word we do to ask children to when they're learning Chinese is 走起, 係嗎? 走起. So putting words, new words together. So that's what we found, even in kindergarten children. That's a very significant indicator that shows how they are ready to learn Chinese and how that will help them to establish their vocabulary as well as word reading skills. Okay, so I will continue. Oops. So we went on to I went on with a professor in Hong Kong U. We went on to establish to have a look at how actually kindergarten children. Previous studies have mostly focused on primary school. So we went on to look at kindergarten children and to compare how second language kindergarten children is different from local native speaking children on the range of language as well as meta-linguistic skills and any reading related skills. What are the sub-skills that are their lack of? And perhaps that could give us a clue how we can design our pedagogy, how we can design our intervention. So this is what we have found. If you can see, I think this one doesn't, oh yeah, this one. If you can see here, so this is L1 native Chinese speakers, and this is L2 native Chinese speakers. What we have found is they do not differ from each other on basic visual skills. They are not different. Actually, second language Chinese speakers, they're better than the native Chinese speakers on the English language skills. Their English vocabulary is better, the phonological awareness skills is better. But they're weaker, the red line, the red arrows pointing to, they're weaker on all range of Chinese reading related skills. So when we ran the regression, statistical regression, what we have found for both Chinese native speakers and second language speaker, these are the core skills that are predict their Chinese word reading skills. These include vocabulary knowledge. Second, their meta-linguistic skills, including morphological, specifically morphological awareness skills. And their orthographic memory, so how well they can remember certain radicals and how they can identify radicals within the character. Hand-eye coordination skills, how well they can copy a character or symbol for that matter. So in this sense, what we have found is, we found that basically for Chinese, learning to read Chinese, you need to have basic language, oral, general language skills, as well as code-related skills. And that's what we call the morphological awareness skills, orthographic skills. And these are the skills like componential skills that's supporting Chinese learning. So here's our research question, or this gives us challenge. What kind of method would help L2 Chinese-speaking children improve their Chinese learning as a whole that is age-appropriate, suitable for their age range that also language level appropriate, that meets their language needs, and that is effective. And most important of all, we think, is that is also fun. If children learn only when they feel it's fun. So with that in mind, we design our research. With that in mind, we looked around. One of the very important strategy that has been tested around the world, I would say, in both in the Western literature, but also in the Hong Kong context specifically, as you can see here, by Bonnie from CityU, as well the McBride from Chinese U. They have tested for both first language kids, second language kids, kids with low socioeconomic status, and also at home, as well as in the kindergarten. So this dialogical reading has been proved as being a very effective pedagogical choice for both home and school. So we aim to, based on the previous research that has been identified, the research has been done in 2008, that research tested proof that dialogical reading paired with morphological awareness skills has yielded more significant effect on children's vocabulary knowledge as well as early literacy than the dialogical reading alone. So we want to bring that forward, how we can design a kind of a program that also tackles on both general oral language skills as well as code-related skills. For example, the orthographic skills. How can we design these fun activities that children enjoy, but also yield good results? So we went ahead to employ 127 kindergarten children, 3 K1 and K2 children, actually K2 and K3 because the second term, from 8 different kindergartens. We break them into 3 different groups: the dialogical reading with multisensory activities, dialogical reading with morphological awareness skills, and control group that is only having dialogical reading. So we have 30 trainees groups, 30. So each group has about 3 to 5 kids together. And we trained 3 university educated educators. I'll jump through. We carefully chose 12 books, and that runs through 3 months. And this is our basic design. Apparently the PowerPoint doesn't. Okay, I'll just give you the meaty bit. And the first, we run through, typically the program is designed in 3 steps. The first step, because they're second language learner, we design to preview some of the key vocabulary that appears in the book, and using total physical response to help children to understand the vocabulary. And this is all listening and comprehension. And then the second step, we run dialogical reading sessions, episode. So I want to show you just 1 minute of this video that I've...
係啦，星期5嘅時候你食咗幾多個橙啊？5係啦，1、2、3、4、5，食咗5個橙喎。阿 Riva 幫我餵毛毛蟲食5個橙啊！係啦，呢度唔係㗎，佢星期5係食橙㗎。
Okay, so I don't have that much time, so I could only show you very, very briefly. If you're interested, I could find another chance. So basically, in this case, we make dialogical reading, like the name suggests, is basically carry out the dialogue. So instead of get the children to listen, we get them to interact with us. So we followed up with the multisensory activity group. We get them to play with Play-Doh. We get them play with the cards, and also coloring And so really, we selected some of the characters that are very essential in the book, and they really have a fully understand, meaningful interaction with the character. So that's for the multisensory group. For the morphological awareness skill group, this is more oral language interaction. So we get them, for example, earlier they had the red ball, yellow ball, and blue ball. So we get them to talk about how about the red pen, yellow pen, and blue pen. So make them to think about how the morphing is set up. So here's our result. Our result find out in terms of Chinese word reading, the dialogical reading group with multisensory paired up the program has yielded the most significant result in terms of word reading, and dialogical reading with morphological awareness skills seems to yield more significant result in terms of their vocabulary learning. And also, they have, in terms of dictation, as you can see here, the dialogical group with multisensory combined program yield the most significant result as well. So, quick discussion. We conclude that from this study, dialogical reading is a very effective program for even low kindergarten children in Hong Kong. And also, as you can see in the program, the children are very engaged. They found it is fun. They really very looking forward to see us once a week. And we also want to conclude that the meaningful multisensory activities that followed up with the dialogical reading really enhance the ability, the literacy skills in these children. And morphological awareness skills is also another effective activity that helps children to strengthen their vocabulary. So in general, we would like to recommend this as a kind of pedagogical practice in a local kindergarten. Maybe we can discuss that a little bit later again. So that's all about our project, and these are some selected reference. Thank you very much.
Today, of the talk, my project focus on the teaching approach and literacy outcomes in kindergarten in Hong Kong regarding English learning. So today I'm going to talk about my study. The study is pretty big, involve a lot of variables, so I'm not going to go through the very details, but I would like to really talk about what is the meaning of the findings a little bit more. I hope I could have better time management. Okay, so first of all, I think there should be some early childhood educators here, so you should be quite familiar with Hong Kong situation. So in Hong Kong, basically all kindergartens would have English learning implemented in their school. And it's pretty important for parents because also in terms of policy, we have bilingualism and trilingualism and biliteracy policy in Hong Kong. But, and also in the curriculum guide published by the Education Bureau, they also recognize the importance of early exposure to a second language. So, so it's pretty important and is widely expected, and we have high expectation on our kids in their second language learning. But if you know the situation in Hong Kong kindergarten, you know that, and also there were some surveys actually done in earlier showing that how English learning is, how English is taught in kindergarten is quite diverse. Different schools would use different methods. Some schools would use follow textbook. Some schools would design their own curriculum, and they also have different focuses in their curriculum. And so my study is actually interested, is a very basic study in the field, I would say, is just to look at is sort of descriptive, just to look at what kind of activities or how kindergartens designed or implemented English learning in the schools. And we also follow children's literacy development, and hopefully we could find some relationship between the two. So, of course, when we're talking about teaching approaches, it's pretty complicated issues, like what to teach, how to teach, what is the quality of teaching. There are many, many things actually would impact on literacy development, no matter it's the first language or second language. So we need to have a focus. And so we decided to look at, from the literature, there has been a long discussion about English instruction regarding whether it's more meaning-focused instruction or approach, or it's more code-focused instructional approach, especially related to literacy learning. So here, my study focus on the literacy outcomes, basically is reading and writing, or emergent literacy skills. Before they become literate, there are some skills that children need to acquire, such as phonological awareness, such as Latin knowledge, etc. Okay, so there are basically two approaches. One is meaning focus, is more like, if you know, the literature is more like a whole language approach. That's the side of the continuum. It's like more focused on the social context. You teach vocabulary. You focus more on the interaction, conversations, in terms of, and using this to support literacy development. And some of my other study actually show the oral language skills in early years are very important for future literacy development, especially in early years. Okay, so on the other hand, we have another focus is, because when you talk about literacy for English, you're basically talking about reading words, word recognitions, or whether you are able to segment words into phonemes so that you can sound it out. So that's what we call phonics. And then you, from the word level, you go on and go on to the sentence level, to the passage levels, etc. So another focus of instruction is usually what we call explicit teaching of Latin knowledge. Okay, so it's actually, you know, that's why phonics is very popular around the world, not only in Hong Kong. And also, on the other hand, in some local study actually also shows letter name knowledge, your ability to name letters, the 26 letters, are actually very good predictors of your reading skills in the future. And very interestingly, it's actually also a very good predictor for your Chinese skills as well. Okay. Just a sidetrack. Okay, so another factor that would be affecting the literacy growth would be, of course, quality of instruction. Imagine, for example, you do a lot of meaning focused approach, which is, we think, should be the focus in kindergarten, but you did it badly, then it would also would have positive impact on literacy development. So we also would look at, this is not the key focus of our project, but we also try to put it into our equation. So I'm not going through the detail, but you know, is the quality is also important. Then how we define quality is we use a very generic approach like responsiveness, class size, and feedback, whether you are giving feedback, where you're able to engage your children, etc. Okay? So the objective of the study is to first to describe, so it's a descriptive study, what is happening in the schools in terms of English learning. And another one is want to look at if we, at the same time, also monitor children's growth in literacy, in early literacy, English literacy, and to see what actually are there a relationship between the two. Okay, so we did a couple of things in the project, but I'm not going through all the details. But we basically did recruited 13 schools from different geographic locations in Hong Kong, and they have different mode of English learning in the school, from like the mode of all the lessons be implemented by net teachers, from all the lessons implemented by Cantonese-speaking teachers. So it's a variety. And we developed an observational system so that we try to capture the teaching content, the quality, and other things in the lesson that we observed. And so we videotaping and coding the lessons. In total, we coded 128 lessons, and around 40% of them are done by Canton-speaking teachers, and around 60% of them were done by net teachers. And we measure literacy skill on around 300 children at 3 time points: beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year. In case 3, in their final year of kindergarten education. Okay, so the observational system, I don't have time to go through the details, but basically we have some actually finer distinction. For example, phonics, we still have some smaller categories, but I'm not going through the details. But basically, you know, the code-based one is like they teach phonics, print awareness, so it's like showing prints, and they know some convention in the print. Reading and comprehension, like reading sentences or words, and writing, spelling activities. And for meaning-based instruction or approach would include like listening, speaking, oral vocabulary, syntax in an oral form. For example, like also teaching the kids to say some sentences or be knowing some sentence structure, but more focused on the oral form. And phonological awareness, which is, we know is quite important for English literacy, is your sensitivity to the sound structure of the language. So, for example, it's rhyming, like onset and rhyme, whether you are able to identify the initial sound of a word verbally through your listening skills. Okay, it's not so much about, so it's different from phonics. Phonics is more about you are shown a letter, and then you are asked whether you know the letter sound of that letter or grapheme. Okay, so I make it very, so because we have lots of things there, but I just make it simple. So we basically observe, coded all the lesson, and then we come out with a total percentage of time they spend on different activities. So you see the percentage here, like 14% of time that the lesson we observe are spent on code-based instruction, and around 80% of time, which is focused on meaning-based instruction, which is, I think, is something good. Something is doing quite well in the field, that they in early years that you really need to build the foundations for the oral language skills, like especially in listening and speaking. And we also develop, because we also know a little bit more about what they are doing. So we have a very simple check. But I would say this part is pretty rough. It's not actually the focus of the study. But it's quite interesting. Actually, the finding is we want to know for how many % of time, okay, we just make it very rough, is like whether it's present or absent in the lesson that we recorded. Okay, it's like they do story reading, or they do post-story reading activities, or they're singing using songs, which is also a common pedagogy in kindergarten, like singing and movement, and then games, okay, that is play. Okay, you engage children in play. So roughly, you can see around 40% of time, they tend to do, it's more popular to, I would say, it's more common to do read aloud than share reading or dialogic reading in the early context. And then the post-story telling or reading activities is relatively few. That means still, after story reading, maybe they not really engage or they move on to do some other things, but not like post-reading activities. Okay, they use a lot of singing and movement as one of the pedagogy. And game is sort of quite common, maybe around 50% of time. Quality of instructions, I think in general, is pretty positive too, except for the class grouping. It's always, from our observation, it's quite common that the class size is pretty big in English lesson. It's more common to do a whole class activity than small group. For others, I think we use a 5-point scale, and it turns out to be pretty good, around 4 or a little more than 4. Okay, so the major finding is about whether any relationships between like some school or teachers' variables, because from the curriculum document, we collected all the information, and we also have the literacy assessment on children. So we put in a lot of variables here. Like we also like to control for example, whether the teacher's qualification, whether they are taught by the amount of time taught by net, or even among the schools, they vary a lot on the instructional time. So like, for example, in some schools, they have 2 or 3 English lessons per week, but in some schools, they have it every day, maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour, which is pretty much. So we control for all these, and then we also have how many words they learn per week. So because we examine their curriculum, so we can get all this information. The homework they assign, the amount of homework they assign to students. And then we also input of course, the coding data we derive from the recording. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the statistics, which is pretty complicated. But anyway, I just like to summarize that, like, for example, we measure 5 emergent literacy skills: vocabulary, letter knowledge, philological awareness, reading, and spelling. Okay, and look at what factors would be significantly related. For different outcomes, actually, the predictors were different. For example, for vocabulary, we find that like the teaching quality is marginally significant, and then the homework is a significant predictor, and letter knowledge is also homework. But for philological awareness, you see there were more factors like English instructional time, synchronization with Chinese curriculum, time spent on meaning-based instruction, time spent on code-based instruction, etc. And then for the reading is like the target words grouping, group size. Of course, the smaller group size is better, and also synchronization with Chinese curriculum. So it's on different. So I think I would, because of time, I also would just draw you on some key findings. Okay, so from the observation and also from the curriculum document that or the interview with school that we know, in general, there is a dividing role in English language teaching in ECE settings in general. Okay, so it's getting more and more common that the Cantonese-speaking teachers are involved in English teaching now, but at the same time, there is a role of division of labor, sort of, in school. So net teacher is usually deployed to teach phonics, or more like to read story. And then the Cantonese speaking teachers are doing other things in the curriculum. And phonics teaching is very common. Actually, all the schools have put phonics elements in the curriculum. And so still very diverse practice. And then, as I said, the 80% of meaning-based approach, which is in line with the curriculum guide. And then why homework is sort of coming out. Okay, is it more homework is good? Some is not in line with our belief, right? So, but I guess homework is an opportunity to give parent to take a role, okay? So for school, assign more homework, but because in this study we don't see the quality of homework, but we do know that like they assign worksheet or whatever, that it would, especially for second language learning, the parental support is very important. So homework is create opportunities for the parent to support children's learning English at home. And we also find like when designing curriculum, if the English curriculum is aligned with the general theme-based learning, would be something positive. I think it's also in line with our knowledge about mental lexicon, or because when you learn through language, they're not separated, they're integrated in our brain. So this is something good. And we also find that we should strengthen some meaningful pedagogies, like, for example, why teachers tend to do read aloud more than share book reading. Okay, is it there is a need there in teachers? Is it they feel that they still not have enough skills in doing, for example, share reading or dialogic reading? Okay, so I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just at 1 or 2 points, I will end this presentation. And so, and also one more thing is about you see for phonological awareness or reading, there are more factors that are actually impacting significant. And especially for phonological awareness, maybe not many parents know what it is. And also that's why school plays a more important role. So if in school, that they, in the curriculum, when they teach phonics, they also include, like, would also help children to learn, to acquire the sensitivity to the sound structure. So there is something important for them. It's perhaps something they could not get from the family and background or from daily life. Okay, and we also find that Hong Kong parents may be still not knowing how to support children at home so much, and that's why we think that school curriculum is something really important, and of course the teaching force is important to help the family to know how to support their kids at home. Okay, so I will end here. I'd just like to thank my collaborator, Dr. Ng from Early Childhood Department, and also all the people who participated in this project. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are running out of time, and we have another session at 5 minutes to 4. So a very quick response and a very inspiring two research. And one is related to the Chinese language learning, and the other one is for the English learning. But at the same time, both Chinese language and also the English one is also a second language to the non-Chinese speaking children and the local children. So I would like to raise maybe 2 questions to Dr. Chow and Dr. Yang. For the first one, to Dr. Chow, yes. Because from your finding, it's very interesting about the dialogic reading, okay? But because of running of time, we are have limited time to see the video. But it is very inspiring that, so I saw research reported that through the dialogic reading plus some of the multi-sensory learning is very interesting. So has a very strong and significant improvement for those children in learning the Chinese word reading and also the character writing. So can you make some more further advice to our principal or to the teachers? Because we are more practical experience, and so we would like to learn from your study. What kind of teaching approach or activities or classroom activities would you like to suggest for the classroom, in helping those non-Chinese speaking children to learn the Chinese? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think if I conclude everything, one of the important things I learned from our study and interact with principal and children is for language learning, no matter what language, time matters, exposure matters, and use of the language matters. So if you ask me to give any advice, I would maybe suggest maybe kindergarten could consider in the curriculum carve out a particular time, especially for L2 language learner, for this kind of activity combines general language learning as well early literacy learning that engage them, that involves adult interact with these children. And also, perhaps the second thing I would say consider is also mingle these second language children with native Chinese speaking children, because we all know, I think all the early years teacher knows about Vygotsky, this social interactive theories, that the scaffolding is important. The scaffolding also means the significant, stronger speaker in this context. So I think these are the two major points I want to raise.
Thank you, Dr. Chow. So maybe another question is to Dr. Yang. Okay, so it's also a very interesting study to know how the local children learning English as a second language. And from your research, there are so many different kinds of pedagogies. So again, what is the most, maybe pick out one or two, any significant activities or approach? Because I think learning English in Hong Kong nowadays in kindergarten is very common, but we have a lot of what I call the shopping list. Okay, so from your observation in classroom and also some of the literature review in related to the Hong Kong context, just what this morning Professor Ching mentioned about the context is very important. So what will be your further advice for us in helping the children in learning English?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think there was really lots of things, or teachers or principal really get lots of information, like many things are good. But to me, I think maybe Dr. Sum's team is doing very well already. One thing is stories I also like to promote. It's also echo the talk in the morning, like story reading. But we all know story is good for, especially for learning in early years, because to me, learning has to be fun, like Dr. Zhao said, and then for local children, they may not have a very high motivation to learn English because it's us, the adults, want them to learn English. It's not their motivation. When they want to get something, they say in Chinese, why I need to learn English? They cannot see, they cannot know that, oh, when I study university, I need good English. So this is not their motivation, this is our motivation. So this is really important to make English fun, English learning fun. So what can make English learning fun and motivated? So I think story would be very good because children love stories. And it also, because in Hong Kong, I would call it a low immersion context. Children don't expose to English outside classroom. Okay, so it's not a communicative language. So you need a story, then give them a context, an overarching framework when they can engage in a world that use this language. And from that as starting point, and then you can infuse all your learning outcomes into the story context. For example, I really advocate like you do post-story extension activities that you could engage children to revisit some keywords in the story that you want them to know the sound, you want them to know the meaning, you want them to know even the word, how it looks like. Okay, so they would provide like a framework for learning. Then you can, for example, like we also design intervention in preschool. So we use, for example, a story and then design a curriculum. One storybook maybe lasts for 2-3 weeks. So around that storybook, you can do a lot of activities. And this is something I think, and also one observation that or my impression in local curriculum. Of course, in the old days, we say that we use Chinese way to teach English, but it's changed already. It's not. But it's also still very segmented, like one lesson reading story, one lesson learning letter sound, and then another lesson writing. But I think curriculum can be done in a more integrated way. So the 4 language skills is more integrated into the curriculum. And then more collaboration between teachers when they design would be also something I would recommend too.
Okay.
Maybe I talk too much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yang. So because of time limited, I don't know whether we have any 1 or 2 minutes for the 4, okay, for the audience to raise a question. Any question from you?
Anyone has a question
feedback?
for our speakers?
No.
Wow, then I think you have already given us a lot of very rich information and your experience that share with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chan, Dr. Yang, and Miss Gloria Lack. Okay, thank you very much.